senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all of this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 267, How the Script Gets Flipped on Male Victims. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson, to dig into a glaring gender-based double standard on the behavior of people in positions of authority and the vulnerability of people under their control. But first, before we get to that, we've got to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. So, we recently went over an article discussing the question, how could people know if they were biased against men? How would they identify discrimination against men? And, we did find that in some countries people are a little more aware of this, but the United States wasn't necessarily that high on the list. It's better than we thought it was, but not as good as, say, some of the more third world countries are starting to figure out that feminism is crap because they can't afford not to figure it out. But here we've got some pretty blatant and obvious reasons we should be able to figure it out if people were a little bit more aware of double standards. So we've also recently been discussing, false allegations. That's a regular topic here. It's one of my big personal topics because that's kind of what got me connected with the movement online, where I came looking for sort of advice, help, information, anything I could think of for a friend's case, and discovered a whole community of men going through similar experiences in family and criminal court. And so I thought this article, we haven't really talked much about this article, and I think I maybe referenced it a few times, but we really ought to go over it because it's a really great piece of work, and it really highlights something egregious in our society. So this article is from A Voice for Men, follows up on both of those discussions in regard to a particularly vulnerable demographic, male inmates in the prison system. So prepare yourselves, guys. This is rage fuel. What these guys are subjected to and how it is characterized just is ridiculous. The headline is The New Yorker's Jeffrey Toobin, who I think he still writes for The New Yorker. This is, like I said, this is a 9-year-old article. But The New Yorker's Jeffrey Toobin says, cynical and devious male inmates abused female guards. Let's just let that sink in.
I would love to know how. Who's in control here, and what is, and if this is, well, I know this is not actually what this because this is where this is from A Voice for Men,
right?
So,
He's citing an article by Jeffrey Toobin in which Jeffrey Toobin did say that.
Okay, so if that is true, then Jeffrey Toobin, see what I did there?
Yeah.
Doesn't that mean that women aren't really fit for the fucking job?
Yeah, that would be true. I mean, if the male guards can handle it, but the female guards can't, that does indicate that the female guards are doing an inferior job.
How about your diversity and inclusion puts human lives at risk?
Well, and actually, when you think about it, based on the diversity standards, the standards that we get from these people who like to advocate for so-called diversity and inclusion, the prison population is the most diverse population in the country.
Yeah.
It's almost entirely black. And male. That's not diverse though. But yeah, that's the sad thing. We do have a much higher population of black and Hispanic prisoners than any other group, and now we're hearing that they're so powerful and magical that they can abuse their captors. So the basis for the article. In 2013, it says last year, but this, like I said, the article's from 2014. So in 2013, the Department of Justice completed its study of sexual abuse in adult prisons and juvenile facilities. And I also wrote an article for Honey Badger Radio about this or for the Honey Badger Brigade blog about this, by the way, because we looked at the juvenile statistics, and it's just as bad as the adult statistics. In fact, it's worse. Because here you're talking about adult women with underage boys. The paragraph goes on, it wasn't a happy time for feminists. The study showed that most of the sexual abuse of inmates is committed by guards, and most of that is committed by female guards. Female wrongdoing, particularly sexual wrongdoing, is the type of thing feminists prefer to keep out of sight since it contradicts their narrative of female innocence and male corruption. Worse, coming as that information did, in studies not subject to their censorship, readers were able to draw conclusions free of feminist instruction. So, what to do? Well, if you're Adele Mercier is a professor at a university in Canada who Allison just commented on something that she had published. And she had a sort of a slap fight with Allison back and forth and threatened to sue us for publishing verbatim what she said.
Wow.
Kid you not. She didn't do it.
Just typical.
But she did threaten it.
Jesus.
So this was part of that also. If you're Adele Mercier, you simply drop all pretense of intellectual integrity and claim that in the case of boys abused in juvenile facilities, they were asking for it. Yes, if the sexes were reversed and male commentators said the same thing about girls abused by male guards, Mercier would be screaming for his head on a platter. But one of the many privileges of being feminist is freedom from the inconvenient strictures of intellectual honesty. We just got a a comment from Richard Pierre. Gave us $4.99 and said, "Were these female guards from the U.S. women's soccer team by any chance?" No, if that was the case, they would have been beaten by the male inmates. Oh, that's awful. But yeah, that whole discussion, and I'll probably at some point want to go over that article too, because there's some things in that article that contribute to the discussion on adult perpetration of sexual violence and allegations against men as being incompetent at preventing themselves from engaging in sexual violence. So there's that. But in regard to the Adele Mercier discussion, like, I still remember we were all pretty pissed off about what she said. Because what she did was go through and say, well, actually, it wasn't abuse. There were gifts given. And she went on and described grooming. Like, adult grooming of an underage victim of sexual misconduct. Whether it goes from, like, the more minor forms of sexual conduct to full-on rape. What she described was essentially the guards grooming the underage inmates for sex. And then the fact that the grooming led the inmates to think of their relationship as going both ways made it okay. That was basically the way she described it. So, of course, Allison lambasted her, and it was glorious. In only the way it can be when Allison does it. And,
yes.
And she threatened to sue us, and she went ballistic, and Barbara Streisand affected herself, and then her students claimed to be part of Anonymous and threatened us. That never panned out because obviously Anonymous doesn't threaten people for standing up for victims of... That's just not a thing. Anonymous doesn't threaten people for standing up for crime victims. That's never been a thing. You just... So we made fun of them, and that kind of ended it. We mocked them, and when they realized that we were just always going to answer them by mocking them, they quit. Like, you can't fight with somebody that does that, right? It's like getting into an argument with Pee Wee Herman.
Right.
I know you are, but what am I? Infinity! Sorry, but you lose. You suck. So that was that. But that whole thing, the only reason that whole argument happened was because we were talking about male inmates. If female inmates experienced the same percentage of abuse by guards, and they don't, by the way, in female detention facilities, whether adult or youth, the majority of victimization of sexual misconduct is inmate perpetrated. And of the now of the staff, I think they have more male staff there, and that is it's a minority of the abuse, but there are more male staffers involved with the female inmates, and that was a mostly unmentioned thing in regard to the research, was like that the male guards at the prisons where female inmates are housed were the minority among perpetrators, as opposed to the majority, because the inmates were victimizing each other. And with when it's the guards and the inmates, you can tell the dynamic because of the power dynamic, right? So feminists would not deny that it is a form of victimization when it's a female inmate and a male guard.
Mm-hmm.
When it's inmate on inmate, like, if they're complaining about being victimized, they're not talking about a situation where somebody groomed them.
Right.
They're talking about actual physical violence and threat of violence, coercion and stuff. So that's a totally different thing. And the opinion people have had, the public view seems to have always held that this is the majority of what takes place in male inmates. That, there's a significant amount of prison rape, but we don't count it in the statistics because that's just mostly inmate on inmate and it's how they have sex. Well, no, actually. It's female guards and other staffers taking advantage of a captive population that cannot get away with hurting their feelings or offending them or anything. So if they tell them no, and the women react the way women react when they are rejected, the men are in danger. So there is violence or threat of violence there.
Absolutely.
So it goes on. So much for the juvenile facilities. But what about the adult ones? We now have our answer. It appears in a New Yorker article by Jeffrey Toobin. Now, Toobin barely mentions the DOJ studies, but his article is plainly an answer to the uncomfortable questions they raise about the sexual abuse of male inmates by their female guards. Unsurprisingly, Toobin peddles the standard feminist line that somehow the sexual connection between the men in cages and the women who hold the keys was a matter of what else? Male power and female helplessness. Those poor helpless female guards with the keys to the cells.
Yeah, I mean, God, whatever did they do? I mean, all they did was show up to work, Hannah. I mean, this is a workplace harassment situation now, right? Like, they can go to HR.
Oh, yeah.
It's ridiculous. Goddamn ridiculous. Pants on fucking head, stupid. But then again, I would expect nothing less from Jeffrey Toobin.
Yeah. This is really the sad thing about this is, we're talking about probably one of the most powerful positions you can be in outside of, say, being an authority over the general population. Like, teachers have power because, they can affect students' education, but you can go to a different school, right? Employers have power because they can affect your progress at a particular job, but you can get a different job, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't easily get transferred in the prison system, and even if you do get transferred, if a guard is angry with you, your reputation follows, right?
Yeah.
So it or precedes you even. So there's, if a guy gets in wrong with the guards at a prison, no matter what recourse he has, the rest of his career there is going to be hell.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not just, they can be mean, they can write him up and affect how long he has to stay. If he's, they can accuse him of misbehavior. He was making noise at night. He was saying rude things. He was doing this. He was doing that. They can accuse him of all kinds of misconduct, and that there are little punishments and big punishments that get handed out for different types of misconduct. And, I mean, if you have areas of the prison that are off camera, it's not hard to do something like that to somebody. They can be extra rough with him. They can lie to the male guards and have the male guards be extra rough with him. They could give another prisoner incentive to assault. So a guy is under a lot of pressure. If a female guard does not like him or does like him and he is not wanting to comply, he can be in deep shit.
Yeah, and so the scariest thing that I just thought about during this whole conversation is, a lot of these women, these female guards, also have children.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine growing up in a household like that, with a person like that who would exert that level of power and really just cruelty and
yeah. And
we don't know what reason.
We don't know what percentage of female guards is involved, but we do know that the greatest percentage of abuse is perpetrated by female guards.
Right. But just the idea that you can do something like that to someone who is helpless.
Right.
It's people like that belong nowhere in, many systems in our society, but I would say first and foremost the criminal justice system, because they just don't they don't really have a firm sense of what is right and what is wrong, because when you can insert your own moral justifications for things, or the lack thereof, then you shouldn't really have that level of power over people.
Or they don't care. They don't care what's right or wrong.
Right.
I look at this and, you can't possibly not realize that, especially in the modern world, you can't possibly not realize. There's been discussion for decades about this, like 70 years of feminist activism on this, claiming that if there is a power dynamic in a relationship, in a so-called relationship, where one person has a significant amount of power over the basic aspects of another person's life, your ability to continue in your employment, your ability to come and go as you please, any kind of, how much do you get paid, whether or not you continue in your education process, any of that kind of thing, that is not a legitimate relationship, and the person in power is exploiting the person beneath them. It's why college professors get censured if they have relationships with their students while their student is under them in class. Probably not the best wording, but yeah, like you can't do that as a professor. You can't do that as a school teacher, even if your student is an adult. In some states, you can actually get convicted of a crime for that, even if your student is an adult. In the workplace, it's considered workplace harassment. A lot of workplaces have non-fraternization policies that basically you can't date in that workplace, or you can't date a supervisor, a person in a supervisory position, even if they're not your supervisor. Like, just all of that. And yet, what does Tubin say about this? It says, unsurprisingly, Tubin peddles the standard feminist line that somehow the sexual contact between the men in cages and the women who held the keys was a matter of what else? Male power and female helplessness. He doesn't waste much time getting to the point. Just 600 words into a 5,200-word article, which is why we're not reading his article, Tubin says, cynical and devious men succeeded in dominating women who were normally their keepers.
Can I clarify? This is the same Jeffrey Tubin who who was caught jacking it on a Zoom call.
Yes.
And got like a year of paid leave, and then he just came right back.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, iron law of woke projection never misses. Eh?
Definitely. And here's where I'm going to read Richard Bier's next comment. He gave us $1.99 and says, maybe this justifies paying women less.
Yeah.
Like, and I can't argue with that, right? It doesn't say anything about them dominating the men this way.
But paying women less wouldn't keep them out of this role, right? They wouldn't keep them out of these positions.
Right.
That's kind of the bottom line. What needs to happen is, I don't know how you do this with like prison guards, but I mean, it's much like with the military. They reduced the goddamn standards for women to get in.
Yeah.
Right? That needs to fucking change. But I don't know what the requirements are to be a prison guard. So I want to start there. But god damn it, I think there needs to be some more extensive background information into like maybe there's mental health. I don't know.
I can tell you from family experience, you can become a prison guard right out of university if you have some training in law enforcement. You don't have to have a large or particularly muscular physique. You don't necessarily have to have any kind of training in combat or handling, like they train you in that kind of stuff. But
you have to be like certified in anything?
You do have to, if I remember right, you do have to have some sort of certification in the law enforcement field.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it was. You don't have to be a cop. And I've actually had a coworker that was a guard in a juvenile facility too. I don't think he has that same background. I don't think he's a police officer, and like as far as his training goes. But he also had law enforcement training. He's a probation officer for juveniles now. So like this is, you basically have to be qualified to do that kind of work. But as far as the background check is concerned, if you've never been caught perpetrating, a background check is useless. Background check doesn't catch somebody before their first time committing a crime, and it doesn't catch crimes that are committed in ways that are geared toward avoiding discovery. So it won't catch a personality. It'll catch a history of commission of crimes, a history of abuse that's been documented. So it's hard to catch women that way. But they could do other things that, psychological testing. They could do what, like in my profession, if we have female clients, female patients in healthcare also sometimes, depending on where you work, they don't allow, if it's a situation where the patient or the client is particularly vulnerable to abuse, to sexual abuse, like some don't have a sense of their own privacy. And it can happen with senile dementia in the elderly, and it can happen with some types of intellectual disability. They just don't put men with as helpers working with those women. And that way, there can't be a problem, they think, because they don't consider women capable of that type of abuse. The problem is they don't do the same thing for men. Right? And that's here in the story we're reading. It makes it pretty obvious the same thing needs to be done for men. On the other hand, it may be difficult to fill those positions if they don't hire women. Maybe they're just not paying enough to attract enough men to do that job. And maybe they're imprisoning too many men.
Yeah. All good questions.
Yeah. But it's just amazing. Cynical and devious men succeeded in dominating women who were normally their keepers. Women who can write them up and get them in trouble. Women who can accuse them and be taken seriously, where their word will not weigh as much in any hearing they go through, because they're inmates. Somehow were dominated by these men in cages.
I'm befuddled by the logic that people who are so convincing couldn't keep their ass out of jail.
Yeah.
but they can convince these rational, normal thinking females that they should
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't get it. It doesn't work out I can't compute.
They couldn't dominate the judge. That's what it is.
Yes.
Too bad they didn't get a female judge. Like, Your Honor, wink wink, nudge nudge. No, I don't think that would work either. So, how does he manage the feat of turning the base metal of facts into the gold of feminist mythology? It wasn't easy. Indeed, I'd say he failed altogether. His evidence for the proposition is the thinnest gruel, but I suspect it'll be enough to nourish those who've swallowed the feminist Kool-Aid. Against a backdrop of women clearly acting in their own self-interest, Tubin cobbles together a very sorry mishmash of self-contradiction and intellectual hocus-pocus that would make anyone but a feminist blush. The Baltimore City Detention Center, BCDC, is over 200 years old. It's located in a high-crime part of the city and houses over 2,000 male inmates awaiting trial, sometimes for months or years. Those inmates are overseen by 650 correctional workers. Almost all of the inmates and guards are African American, and the most powerful gang in the place is called the Black Gorilla. That's Guerrilla family.
Say racism, okay?
Yeah.
This is an actual word.
Plus, it's their name for themselves. It's not somebody else's name for them. So, but that, just for the podcast listeners who cannot see the text, it's guerrilla, like guerrilla warfare. So these guys are militant. Guards are mostly, and no, they were not giving themselves a racist name. Guards are mostly called from the surrounding community, and few men there qualify. I guess that would be another factor. If it's placed in a high crime neighborhood, then and most of the crime in the neighborhood is going to be committed by gang members. That takes up most of the men in the neighborhood. There aren't very many men in the neighborhood that would want to do that job that would qualify. And I imagine being a man in that neighborhood, working in that prison, would make you a target among men who live in the neighborhood outside of the prison, who are connected to people inside the prison.
Yeah.
Guards are mostly called from, And the job requires a high school diploma, clean urine, and a clear criminal record, leaving most local men looking elsewhere for work. About 75% of the guards, about 487 people, are women.
Fuck's sake.
Now, that balance is not the same in the juvenile system. When I looked into the Bureau of Justice statistics on the juvenile prison system, female guards overall across all of the juvenile detention facilities that were studied were like 45% of the guards, something like that. It was less than 50%. But they were responsible for 95% of sexual misconduct. So at least the misconduct that was reported by inmates.
Yeah. Good Lord. And just to remind everyone, this is Baltimore, so I can totally see that, because Baltimore is just I mean, you want to talk about a shithole. If Baltimore could be a country, it would be a shithole country. It's just so dilapidated and overlooked, overgrown, forgotten. I mean, the government in that city absolutely ransacked the residents, and there's no wonder that people are fleeing at the rate that they are. You know, if you have ever driven down a road in Baltimore, I mean, you better have gas in your car, and I'm not even joking. You better not run out of gas in Baltimore on the wrong street in the wrong time. It's bad. It's what I would imagine that like Chicago is like, but I don't know. It's horrible to think about. So when they describe this situation where, you know, to be eligible to have this job, you know, you have to a high school diploma. We know there's going to be more women that have. I can't even imagine that in Baltimore, because good God, the kids in that school system, it's a wonder that anyone is even graduating legitimately.
Well, I mean, part of the reason that happens is because standards are lowered in some school systems. And
right.
I wasn't aware of this until my dad told me this story years and years ago. He had a student when he was a fairly young teacher, actually. So this is not a new problem. Like, my dad started teaching in 1968 or 69 on an emergency certificate, and then went back to school for a year to get his actual teaching certificate, and then taught ever since. So we're talking a long time ago. But he had a student that came from an inner city Chicago school to a small community to go to their school system, and he was doing well in his class in Chicago, but he was so far behind the students in the small community that he needed tutoring. And he caught up, you know, like Dad helped him catch up. And this I don't know if this was when he was actually teaching or if this was when he was tutoring when he was in high school. But in any case, I'm not going to tell you who the young man was because he's a business owner now and it's not a small business. But in any case, this is the difference between city schools and smaller community schools. You have about half the students in the bigger city schools, their parents really don't care what's going on at the school, or they're not in a position to demonstrate that they care.
Yeah.
And you get both. And I had a friend who was teaching in the Dayton public school system for a few years, and one of her students, and we're not talking like a high school kid here, we're talking a young student, elementary school, pointed that out to her. That she had, they were lining up, I think, for a fire drill or something. They had to go out the door, and they had to go in an orderly fashion, and it had to be quick. And about a third of the class just would not line up. They were just little hellions. And the other kids were just standing there watching them and watching the teacher try to round them up. And they knew better than to participate because they didn't want to get bullied later for it. But the one student just turned to her and said, you know, the difference between us and them. And, you know, my friend says, what's that? And the kid broke her heart. She goes, our parents love us. And it's like, at the age of, you know, elementary school age kid, this kid understood that those kids were ignored by their parents. Yeah. Those were kids who, if the teacher brought treats for the class, they would wrap the treat up in a napkin and save it for after school so they would have something to eat that night. And So you have, in a lot of neighborhoods like that, you have the school to prison pipeline isn't just greased by teacher prejudice. It's also greased by local socioeconomic situations. And those local socioeconomic situations also are the school to gang pipeline, even if the person doesn't go to prison. And they do predispose, in particular the boys in that neighborhood, to outcomes that are not advantageous for them, and they're not advantageous for the community. So it is hard. Are you going to find male guards in a situation like that? Baltimore's probably not abnormal as big cities go in the United States right now. We are a mix of first world country with a bunch of third world areas. Like, we had people in Michigan experiencing lead poisoning in their city water because the city wouldn't fix the water. They couldn't afford it. The state wouldn't give them a grant. The federal government wouldn't give them a grant. People had to fight for the right to have the water system they are taxed to maintain provide them with water that was not poisonous.
Meanwhile, in the state of California, Nancy Pelosi sitting on about what, good $300 million in restorative funding for projects that just never materialized. And it just blew. Oh, God, I don't know what it's going to take to shake these people awake and realize. And I think a lot of people at least I would like to think a lot of people do realize what's happening, but I think their anger and their frustrations are misdirected. Yeah. Right? They're not really going after the people who are putting these laws in place and
putting these kids in this situation where this is how their life goes.
Right.
If we didn't have such a high male prison population, it would be quite a bit easier to manage them without having sexual predators watch over them.
So I have a little bit of a nit to pick with this whole school to prison pipeline thing, because I think a lot of the blame gets placed indirectly, right? It's not who is putting these children into the system. It's the women who are having these children who can't afford to feed them properly, house them properly, clothe them properly, care for them properly.
Yeah.
On their own, because of, through no fault of their own, but a majority through their own direct decisions, right? So when you have a bunch of children who are living in poverty, you are putting your children in these situations for them to grow up in. Right? The single mothers, they go to work, they have to work 2 and 3 jobs, to feed their kids. Well, who then is there to take care of your kids after the school is done with them? Right? You send them off to school so that they can raise your kids. And then it's so easy to place the blame on this system that you sent your child to.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Well, one of the things the ACLU fails at, like, they're the ones that coined the term school to prison pipeline. And I would say that it's not an incorrect term, because it's something that came about in part as a result of what are they called? Zero tolerance policies.
Right.
Where they basically don't allow the adults to mentor the children. So you've had a spectrum of things happen. First of all, the increase in impoverished single custodial motherhood. And the reason I say custodial motherhood is because this is a situation, most of the time, when we're talking about the school to prison pipeline and the kids who experience it, We're talking not just about single moms, but single moms who have sole custody. Maybe the father isn't even in the picture. Maybe they haven't even told the father that he's a dad. Maybe they don't know who the father is. And that situation is, we're not allowed to criticize that. As a society, we're not allowed to say, what have you done to your child by denying your child a parental relationship, a parent-child relationship with his father, right? And then on top of that, you usually see this isn't happening in Nancy Pelosi's neighborhood, right? If it does happen in Nancy Pelosi's neighborhood, that chick has a nanny, and her family's there to help with the kids, and there's other parents in the neighborhood that maybe team up with her to help with the situation. And maybe it's happened because her husband died unexpectedly or cheated with a maid and left, but like, depending on what kind of relationship she had with him. But in any case, it's not she hooked up with some guy, doesn't know him, doesn't know anything about him, never bothered to follow up with him, had a baby and just moved on. And so in those neighborhoods where it's more common for that to happen, then you also have the situation where the kids are running wild in the neighborhood when they're not in school. They're fending for themselves against older kids and the criminals in the neighborhood that are adults. They're getting recruited as drug dealers by gang members who are older than they are, and they're getting pressured with the understanding this is the only way you can be safe in this neighborhood. If you don't become one of us, you will not be safe. And as a kid, you don't necessarily have the logic to recognize, gosh, if I become part of this gang, I will eventually get shot. So it's not necessarily safer. You don't have somebody that you can go home to and say, Mom, I'm in trouble. These guys are pressuring me to join a gang because Mom is busy and you're afraid you're going to get in trouble with her for being pressured. Or she may give you the worst possible advice. Well, you do what you got to do. Bring in some money. We're starving. And whose fault is that? Hers. Right? So on top of that, then we have the situation of, again, if this were to happen in Nancy Pelosi's neighborhood, there'd be 50 summer programs for those kids. Reading programs, math programs, recreational programs, where there would be trustworthy adults. And the kids would be getting engagement with mentorship and so on. In a neighborhood where, you have the single mom who doesn't know who the dad is and is poor and thinks of herself as unfortunate, who starts those programs? It's not the neighborhood moms, right? It's not anyone in that neighborhood. So it's not anyone who's personally invested in the welfare and outcomes of those kids. And they don't bring people from in the neighborhood to mentor those kids. They're strangers from outside the neighborhood. They're people nobody in the neighborhood knows. How do you know if you trust those people? Right? And if the moms, who are the ones that are, letting their kids run wild, aren't checking on their kids when there are no programs, are they really going to check into the people that are running those programs? So it's one of those situations where the kids get no mentorship, they get no protection from criminal elements, they get no assistance in learning how to navigate the world that they're in, right? And then they go to school, and let's say little Bob misbehaves in school, and his mom is one of those moms that doesn't really care about him, is busy, maybe she's working, maybe she's doing work under the table, and maybe she's doing illicit work under the table, right? She doesn't want to come into school. So when you get disciplined in school, the school contacts your parents, she's going to come in and throw a screaming fit. And more often than not, it's, you can't punish my child. There's nothing wrong with my child. My child didn't do anything. He doesn't get the benefit of, okay, maybe don't do that. That's not a good idea. Or, maybe mom finds out he was in a fight and then doesn't stand up for if he was defending himself against an attack by the other kid. Right? So you get this situation where these guys don't have anybody to stand up for them. They don't have anybody to mentor them. They don't have anybody to guide them. And when they find a teacher in the school that is willing to try to guide them, the teacher gets in trouble. And then there are teachers who prey on these kids too. I like, there's been, in the last few years, there's been 6 or 7 stories that I've just randomly run across about teachers in the Dayton metro area, right around me, that have gotten busted for not just molesting a student, but doing so in an environment that the writer of the story deemed a sex party. Like, literally, an orgy. And we're talking underage kids.
Jesus.
So it's, when we say school to prison pipeline, it sounds like we're talking about this really simplistic, the kids they go to school and they don't get what they need at school, and then when they get disciplined, the discipline is too harsh, and schools do call police on ridiculous things, like a kid not wanting to take their jacket off because they're cold, or a kid getting attacked by another kid and running into the wrong room when they run away, and you're not allowed to go in there. Call the cops. Just stupid things that I've heard of. A kid bringing their marching band, what's it called? They're the baton twirlers and stuff in the marching band, but this marching band had these wooden replicas of rifles. Like, it was very obvious from even a distance that this is not a gun. It's just a piece of wood that is shaped vaguely like a gun, and it's designed to be twirled around and, pointed in different directions and look cool on the football field. And she didn't take it out of the trunk of her car, and somebody found out it was in there, and they called the cops on her.
Oh my God.
Yeah. No, Boda, it's not even ROTC. It's literally, it's the baton twirlers. I can't think what they're called. The Flag Corps. There's another name for them, but
I mean,
nothing,
it wasn't even a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, like
chewed into the shape of a gun. Yeah. So, yeah, there's this whole spectrum of things that are taking place in our schools and the neighborhoods around them that do lead to a lot of young... color guard. Master Rogue got it as color guard. That's correct. That's what I was trying to think of. And it does result, in particular, in a lot more boys ending up in the juvenile detention system. It used to be... This is before I was a student. Well, even when I was a student, if one of the kids wasn't already on probation, if a couple of guys got into a fight in the hallway in school, the school handled it. They did not call police. The boys got detention, or if one of them clearly started it and the other one was just defending himself, the instigator got detention and the other one went to the school nurse. And they both did if they needed to. And the nurse was there every day. And now, you have that system. You also have another situation happening in schools where they're not allowing students that need emergency medications like asthma inhalers and EpiPens and stuff to carry them because of fears of drug. Yeah, I'm not. This is not even new. This is at least 20 years old now. That this has been happening. So, if you have an inhaler, an emergency inhaler, that you're supposed to use the minute an asthma attack starts, You have to go get it from the school nurse
Oh, hell no.
in the middle of
Oh,
an
no.
asthma attack.
No,
If you
no,
carry an
no.
and in some school systems they don't have an exception. Same with an EpiPen. So if you are allergic to something badly enough that you need an EpiPen, you have like 5 minutes if you're lucky. If you're really lucky to use that EpiPen before the allergy will kill you. It causes your immune system to stop your heart and suffocate you to death. And with accompanied by incredibly painful inflammation of all of your soft tissues. I've been through this. I've been in anaphylactic shock. It's usually you don't remember things that happened when you were 4 years old. And I remember this very, very vividly. It hurt so bad, and it was terrifying. And the only non-painful part of that memory is looking back and realizing that the doctor was not promising to do a trick. He was telling my parents if my body didn't start reacting to the medicine, he was going to have to trach me. So it was a very serious situation. And fortunately, I was in the hospital already, so an EpiPen, well, it was an epi syringe, was immediately available. But in a school system, where it might take 4 minutes to walk from the part of the building where the allergy happens, like the cafeteria, to the other part of the building where the school nurse is, and they just send the student with someone else to walk with them, or they send a student to go get it and bring it back, or they send somebody to go get the nurse, like that, the amount of time it can take to get that medication to the student is way too long. And then on top of that, in some school systems, the nurse isn't there every day.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been students who have died, and their parents have sued the schools because their student died in school due to the lack of a present school nurse making their inhaler or their EpiPen unavailable.
Girls, reason number 5,021,021 that I cannot have kids. I don't know what I would do if my child was in need of medicine that was available to him to save his life, and it just took too long because he couldn't have it on him, on his person. I mean,
and I literally went to school every day from the time I was 13 until I graduated with an inhaler in my pocket.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I carry mine every day. I don't know what I would do if somebody tried to look at me in my face and tell me that I couldn't have it. Fuck you. I don't need to be here.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I only ever had one teacher that didn't understand the situation, and she got in big trouble. Ohio has a different guideline than a lot of other states. You can have it on you, but you have to have a physician's note that says why, which makes sense. Among other things, if Billy passes out in class, and the teacher is aware that Billy carries an EpiPen because he's allergic to bee stings, and then she realizes there's a bee in the classroom and Billy has a red spot, then she knows to use that EpiPen. Whereas if the teacher has no idea what's going on and Billy passes out in class, she won't know what to do. So,
I wonder, I don't know why my mind is going here, but I wonder, like, if maybe somebody got attacked with an EpiPen, because what would happen if you injected someone that was not in an anaphylactic shock with an EpiPen? Like, what would happen to them?
Well, what it does is it suppresses the immune response, and it kicks your heart and your lungs into high gear. It would be a very unpleasant experience, but it wouldn't kill you. You could use an EpiPen on somebody and not kill them, even if they weren't having it. But they would have to go to the hospital. If you had a young child, Like, this happened to me when I was 4. If I'd been hit with an EpiPen at 4 years old, I probably would have had a heart attack. I probably would have had and if they have any potential for a stroke, that's also a risk.
Yeah.
But an adult,
So
a fully sized, somebody that weighs 150 pounds or more, it's less likely for them to, unless they have an underlying heart condition. That's just less likely, but it's definitely not an ideal situation. You still have to go to the hospital to make sure you didn't have a heart attack or a stroke or some other, like if you had any potential for aneurysm or any kind of basically a vein blowout. They just want to make sure you're safe. And you have to do that if you use an EpiPen to stop an allergic reaction too. You still have to go to the hospital.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's very dangerous to epinephrine is it's a substitute for adrenaline. Okay. So when somebody yells really loud and you jump and then afterward your heart pounds for a few seconds, epinephrine does that to you on a much bigger scale.
Okay.
So, and it's now it's similar also to the effect of pseudoephedrine. They all do similar things, decongestants, and it'd be like if you had a massive overdose on some form of ephedra. It's not good for your system, and it's not good to put your heart in that condition where it's pounding like that. That's why people talk about adrenaline junkies and everything. Well, you're a lot more likely to have damage from that than you think. Not because your body's natural system does damage to itself just out of hand, but the human body is made to give itself a lot of energy in a situation where you should be scared and fighting back or trying to escape. But it's not intended to survive having to do that over and over again all the time.
Yeah.
So there is that. But in any case, yeah, that environment. So there's that environment in which administrators care more about making policies that look good than they do about whether the kids die from a health condition that we've been able to treat for 80 years or so. With a simple solution, and that is the situation that our students are going to school in.
So what theoretically then would happen to a child that might spontaneously need CPR in the classroom? Are teachers required to be CPR
certified?
So okay, so then now I would think in my mind, right, the logical thing to do would be if your child has an EpiPen or an inhaler, if this is what because it sounds like it's really mostly just for legality's sake, right? They just want to cover their ass in case something happens, somebody accidentally gets stuck with this pen and now there's a whole situation, right? Well, what if the student then checks their medication in with the teacher until their class is over?
And see, that's another one. You'd have to have the student carrying the medicine from class to class. Now, in early elementary school, it makes sense to have the medicine in the classroom, right, with the student, and that's what my school did. But in later, in junior high and high school, a 13-year-old can keep track of their inhaler. A 13-year-old can keep track of an EpiPen. And a 13-year-old is, believe it or not, aware of their own mortality and able to appraise the potential threats of, I will not abuse this, I will not give this to somebody else, because if I need it and I don't have it, I'm fucked. Mm-hmm. Right? A 13-year-old can do that. A 12-year-old can do that. In some cases, a 10-year-old can do that. Mm-hmm. Right, but the schools do not trust the students to do that, and they don't trust the students to leave that kid alone and not take their medicine. Yeah. And it's a really serious situation, and the solution seems to be to withhold the medicine from the kid. And just for the record, just so people understand the gender significance of this, asthma affects boys more frequently than girls. Boys with asthma more often have it more seriously, and there are more deaths of boys under these circumstances. They are less likely to be believed by their teachers and the school administrators, by the school nurse, when they come in and say, I can't breathe. And part of it is they're less likely to panic and cry. Girls panic and cry.
Yeah.
So, but, yeah. And by the way, the other thing, when they give you an epi shot to the chest, and you see that in the movies, and they always they're right up and they're all energetic and everything. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
You feel like you got kicked in the chest by a donkey, and somebody stuck a straw in the back of your head and sucked all the energy out of you. You're just laying there going, oh my God, and your heart's pounding, and you're just getting your oxygen back. Everything fucking hurts. You're not going to get up and immediately be raring to go. Unless you were in a situation where you were in a panic. If it's because of an allergic reaction, that doesn't work that way at all. That's movie magic. It's not real. It's not pleasant.
You just wait until they're giving school kids their daily dose of fentanyl instead of milk.
Jeez.
You're going to get a great deal of I can't breathe at that point, and it's going to get blamed on all sorts of things other than the thing that,
they might as well be, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, they might as well be, though. And this is something that, I was really vigilant against when my kids were in school because, and they do this more to boys than girls, they've been drugging students since I was in school. And it was not as common for, early to mid Gen Xers, but as we got into, the late part of Gen X and the early part of the Gen Y millennial generation, you saw more and more instances where it wasn't the child's doctor saying, in response to the mother talking about particular behavioral symptoms, well, I think your child has ADHD, let's try this drug called Ritalin. It was school teachers and school administrators telling the mother, we can't keep your child under control. If you don't put him on this drug, we're going to expel him and he can't come back. And he won't get an education. And the mother's complying. They, without question, they just go to the doctor. The school says my kid has ADD. Schools would even tell parents what doctors to go to get the medication. And whole classrooms would, the South Park episode on this was not wrong. It wasn't even, I can't even classify it as parody. And I was fortunate I did not have to fight that battle. But I knew before my kid got into school that he was pretty normal in terms of energy levels and attention span and all that. He didn't have an especially good attention span or an especially bad one. I was ready to fight tooth and nail to keep him from being drugged for something like that. Yeah. Now if they'd come along and said, well, he's going through depression, that I would have taken very seriously because that runs in the family. But that never happened either, right? When that happened, when he went through stuff like that, it was him who came to me and told me, not a teacher. And unfortunately, you have this situation where a significant portion of the students in the United States are drugged because their schools are recommending it. Yeah. But then they won't let them take treatment for asthma. Or they won't let them carry emergency treatment for allergens that may be common. They'll change the entire environment and tell you can't send peanut butter sandwiches to school with your kid, but they won't let the kid with the peanut allergy carry an EpiPen. Yeah.
It's so stupid. It's so stupid, and it's unconscionable. You know what I mean? And these are the people that claim to care about your kids. They do not.
And then we wonder. Then we wonder how they end up in an adult detention facility, right? Getting molested by the female guards. So, in 2014, when this was written, the article said there's currently a federal investigation underway into criminal activities inside the BCDC, Baltimore Community Detention Center, and 9 inmates and 27 guards have been indicted. And just for the record, that does not mean that the 9 inmates were sexually violating anybody. They may have been dealing drugs in the prison, because that actually happens a lot. There's whole businesses getting run in prison by... Yeah. Much of Tubin's article relies on information gleaned from that investigation, including wiretaps and cell phones used by inmates. From the look of things, the BCDC was the Wild West. Inside the walls and out, pretty much anything was for sale. Into the jail.
I guess that answers my question, which was how the fuck inmates aren't supposed to have cell phones. But I guess anything is for sale.
Yeah, well, and see, that's the thing. If the prison doesn't have a rule against them having a thing, and the guards allow it in, or the administration allows it in, a visitor can bring anything. I'll bet there were prisoners that had Obama phones, So, like, that was a thing. They get all kinds of... They get all kinds of things. And then you also have... Yeah.
It's contraband.
Then you also have people in the prison system who are in there because, despite being highly book smart, intelligent, they're not very wise about the actions they choose, or they get involved with the wrong people, or they have no ethics or morals.
Yeah.
They make their own cell phones. They make their own two-way radios. They make their own shit. If you can understand the way the object works, what it takes to create one, you can make one.
Yeah.
So, like the IQ range in prison is probably closer to the lower end. There are people that are probably more disadvantaged, and that does create a situation where they're more likely to get into trouble if they do something wrong, and they're more likely to think they have to do something wrong in order to survive, or not be able to get out of, if they're being recruited into a gang and stuff like that. But there are people in prison who are absolute genius too, and fully capable of making their own electronic devices.
Mm-hmm.
Including tasers. There have been guards that have been injured that way, where somebody made a makeshift taser and tased the guard.
Holy shit.
It results in you going into solitary, but you get, there have been incidents like that.
What did you think was going to happen I guess...
But it probably feels pretty damn good in the moment if that guard was mean to you, or you feel like that guard was mean to you.
Exactly, or if he was someone that was, like, coming after you and just really vindictive towards you and allowing certain things to happen, or that a hit is about to come and you gotta take somebody. I don't know how prison people. I don't know. I just know, all I know is what I see on TV, and goddamn it, this shit looks shady as hell.
Well, and the other thing is
accurate representation, right? Like, it's not a nice place. There's a lot of people out there that are looking to take advantage any way, shape, or form they can get it from you.
And also remember, it said earlier in the article that the guards in the prison come from the neighborhood where the prison is, and it is a bad neighborhood. It's a rough neighborhood, right? So they're assuming that the women are qualified because they graduated high school. But they're not considering the fact that there are female gang members and there are female gangs. Like, there are gangs, they're not necessarily gendered, but there's whole female sides of the business and everything. There are female gang leaders. That's... You don't necessarily get a less criminal population when you're hiring from among women than from among men. You just hire from a population that's less likely to get caught. When they do get caught, they're less likely to get in trouble. when they do get in trouble, it's less likely to be as bad, right? They're less likely to get convicted. They're less likely to even get prosecuted, even if they get arrested. They're less likely to be heavily sentenced, and it's less likely to last on their record, so they're able to fly under the radar. So if a gang wanted to create a network in a prison system where they could get product and money to the men in the prison, they would do that by having some of the women in the gang become part of the prison system. You know, like as guards, as there's a prison librarian, as if there's a prison school of any kind, education system of any kind, that's usually run by women. All of that. So yeah, they would definitely have a network in there. So, according to the research, into the jail came tobacco, marijuana, prescription drugs, and food. Most of it under the control of the Black Guerrilla family and its headman, Tavon White. Payment by and to the gang was handled via cell phones. Also controlled by the BGF. The use of Green Dot and MoneyPack debit cards. So for people who have never used those types of cards, when you buy like a Green Dot card or a MoneyPack card, you pay for the card, you pay the amount of money that's supposed to get put on the card, and it's immediately available for spending. You don't have to wait any 24-hour period or nothing. And it can all immediately be removed. So somebody can take it to an ATM or use it with a bank account on a computer and remove the money. You can get the cash back. Take it to a store, buy whatever they want. And I think in the prison system, the commissary uses those cards, if I remember right. That one... If that's the case, like that one was described to me by an individual who was in the system for a while. But those cards are also used by scammers. So, for instance, if somebody wanted to get you for $3,000 or $4,000, they might tell you that you want a Mercedes. And I had a customer this happened to when I worked at the pharmacy. She came in trying to buy a Green Dot card to pay the taxes on the Mercedes that she had won. And immediately I'm like, do you know the person that you're paying this to? Do you know the name of the company or anything? Have you checked this out? Because this is a very popular scam. Oh no, I've got a Mercedes coming to me, And eventually, I got her to check into it. And she had been scammed for something like $1,800 and was in the process of continuing to pay another $1,000 of taxes on a Mercedes that didn't exist.
Oh my God.
That scam's been around for a while, right? So, like, those cards are very unsecure, and gangs use them a lot. Terrorists use them. Scam artists use them. They get used more by illegitimate purposes than by legitimate. So yeah, they're very vulnerable.
And they're worried about Bitcoin. They made this big fucking stink about Bitcoin. Oh, it's gonna be used to conduct illegal trade. You mean like the regular fiat dollar, you assholes? Come on. Oh, the hypocrisy, it burns.
Yeah, it really does. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, that's basically... So in the prison system, they're using these cards too. As the major mode of communication, cell phones, too, become valuable contraband inside the jail. And it's not that hard to get a hold of one. Under the indifferent eye of the jail's administration, businesses boomed with inmates often making more money than they could on the outside. Yeah. And when you can get, you can get food, you can get cigarettes, you can get, drugs, you can get whatever you want in there. How's that supposed to be rehabilitating anybody?
Right. It's not. It's when you understand that it's a business instead of anything that they claim it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Other than keeping these people out of society. And again, this is not even keeping people out of society if they can interact with society. That's the whole point. Holy shit. Send these motherfuckers to Romanian jail. You can't do shit over there, apparently.
I'll bet you can.
Well, I'm sure you can if you know the right people and you speak the right fucking language, but...
Yeah, you pay the right bribes.
Yeah, but... This is just ridiculous.
Yeah. It's almost like rehabilitation isn't the point.
It's not. It's not. Because it's... God, it's just like the fucking medical profession. They don't treat you to heal you. They want customers. Mm-hmm. They want you to keep coming back. That's why the fucking recidivism rate is what it is.
Right. So it goes on. And here's another point to make. Right? So you got the guys that do that. You got the guys with the green dot cards and the cell phones and the drugs and a network of female gang members that they're working with and so on. Right? And those guys are in and out of the system, doing whatever they want, not being rehabilitated, don't care, whatever. Then you got the guys who do one stupid thing and they end up in there for like 18 months or something, and they're trying to rehabilitate themselves, they're trying to get back on their feet and everything, and part of what they have to deal with in jail, part of what they have to survive, is the empire created by these guys. So, and for example, it says Trayvon White bought a BMW and a Mercedes-Benz while in the BCDC. One intercepted phone call revealed him saying he netted over $15,000 per month.
Oh my God.
And this is again written in 2014. If you worked at McDonald's, you probably made about $15,000 a year.
A year,
right? Not bad for a man living in a cage. But of course, none of the contraband that was at the heart of the inmates' enterprise made it into the jail without the guards' help.
Right.
Guards enthusiastically participated in the sale of contraband inside the BCDC. Female guards smuggled the contraband into the facility, concealing it, quote, in their underwear, hair, internally, and elsewhere, according to a government filing. Elsewhere. Internally and elsewhere. Does this mean that when you go into a prison, like we know internally obviously in your mouth, in your vagina, in your ass, right? Internally. But elsewhere has to be like they're bringing in bags, they're bringing in purses, they're bringing in wallets, they're bringing in backpacks, and nobody's searching them.
Right.
Because they're guards. Plenty of guards took part. Between 60% and 75% of the female guards were involved in the smuggling and sale of contraband.
Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. And here's the fucking kicker. All right, let's say you hold all of these bitches up against the wall and say, fuck you, you lose your job, you have to go. Who are they replacing them with?
People from in the community.
Well, but
that's dominated by gangs.
Or that's the thing. They can't. So these people will get what? A citation, a slap on the wrist. Are they really going to get any kind of consequences for this? Are they going to lose their jobs? Absolutely fucking not. Maybe they'll get sent home without pay for a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two. You know what I mean? But 60 to 75% of the female guards, which they already said was 75% of the guard staff in total.
Mm-hmm.
In total.
Yeah, he did the math. He said that's between 292 and 365 female guards joining the fund in this prison system. This is just one prison out of many in the United States. And, yeah, it goes on. Why did they do it? Money, of course. The limited supply of all types of contraband inside the prison meant prices were stratospheric. A single gram of pot fetched $50 or $1,400 an ounce.
Damn!
Female guards supplemented their regular incomes by buying cheaply on the outside and selling dearly inside the walls. One guard, Andrea Rice, was recorded by the feds thus. When I came back into jail, I'm like, shit, I'm not going to stop making my money. You feel me? I seen what the fuck was going on.
Let me read this. Let me read this. When I came back into jail, I'm like, shit, I'm not going to stop making my money. You feel me? Seeing what the fuck was going on. Asked a few people what was up and who was what and what was what. I'm just about my money. You hear me? I love money. I love it. I swear to God.
Jeez. And this is a guard. She's not a prisoner. Right? So again, these men have been arrested for crimes they've committed.
She should be a prisoner. God.
Right? These men have been arrested for crimes. We know some of them may have been in there because of false allegations, but they've been arrested for crimes. Right? They've been convicted. They've been put into a system that is intended to rehabilitate them, according to the description. I don't believe the prison system is intended to rehabilitate, but that's what we are told. We are taxed to pay for this shit. This imprisonment of these men on the idea that it will rehabilitate them or at least stop them from continuing to commit crimes. And these women who are the guards in this prison system are doing this for themselves with no benefit to the inmates in terms of rehabilitation and no benefit to the community at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The inmates just end up not having any reason to stop committing crimes. They may live their whole life in and out of the prison system, in part because this shit's getting facilitated, and there's no downside for them. The BCDC was just the place for her. Rodney, a 39-year-old former inmate, said they can buy a $10 pill on the street and sell it for $100. Others spoke of cigarettes sold for $1 a piece, $1 a cigarette. Guards would buy Percocet on the street for $5 a pill or obtain it free through Medicaid fraud. And this is another thing. In 2014, if you went to the hospital with an injury, it was easier to get Percocet than it was to get Zithromax. You go in and complain of a sinus infection and tell them it's an infection and not allergies because it's painful and there's pressure. They don't give you something to treat the infection, but that you get a prescription for Vicodin. Like it's just crazy. That's not the same. I don't think anymore, but it was back then. So guards would get Percocet and then sell it for $50 a pill on the inside.
What I don't understand is people on the inside aren't just walking around with cash, are they? And they're certainly not paying for things with credit cards. So there's something we're not being told about this exchange rate.
Apparently they are.
Literally sell them for $100 because no one in a prison just has 100 physical dollars. Well, they're exchanging something else. I dread to think what that even is.
Well, you remember how this article started out? There is a bit of a
sexual favors. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Sexual favor things, but you also have if these guards are preying on the prisoners sexually, and they're treating that relationship as a legitimate relationship, they may be giving the prisoners money. You also have prisoners getting this contraband, and then they're selling it. The guy selling the contraband keeps his share, right? The guy selling it to the other prisoners keeps his share, and he has to pay the guard. So everybody gets a cut, and there are prisoners in there that are walking around with money because of that. And people...
I only assume that this happens through... It's either visitors who are somehow able to smuggle things through. Can they just bring it in their pockets because they don't get checked? It's either that, or it's the guards themselves.
Yeah.
Or it's the employees themselves.
It's not an or situation. It's all of those.
Yeah. And, I mean, in terms of visitors, surely they check their pockets. I mean, they could do it through any given airports or court system. Surely they do it. Even more stringently in a prison.
I mean, but if they get a tip off that somebody's coming in to see a certain inmate, then the guards can look the other way. You send a tip down the line.
Exactly.
I think that's how it goes.
If there's a whole gang mafia thing going on in there, this is the thing.
So
gangs in the United
prison
States
guards aren't just rapists. They're also frauds.
they're organized criminals, is what this article is. Organized crime in the United States is huge. There isn't a city in the United States that does not have a major element of organized crime, both in the bad neighborhoods, the high crime neighborhoods, and in its government system. And then in the prison system, organized crime exists among the inmates, the guards, and the administrators. There's organized crime involvement in our judicial system, in our law enforcement system, in our school system. This is... And this started with women. Prohibition opened the door. It's what made it's what made bootleggers popular. Part of what made the mafia powerful. And it created an environment that when drug prohibition came about, also as a result of women demanding safety nets, that led to organized crime. When more drug prohibition came about, when it was expanded, we got more organized crime. And then we got the manufacture of strange and weird things like crystal meth out of that, and more organized crime. And when the prison system became largely about managing the organized crime in the United States, it just became another system for organized crime to take over and use. And that's what we're looking at here. But in among that, you still have, again, these women who are part of this system of organized crime, who become sexually involved with the inmates. And it's not necessarily always inmates who are part of their organization. It's just whoever they decide they want. So all of this stuff that we're talking about here, all of this organized criminal activity, and it is pretty much like multi-level marketing, but with guns and getting arrested when you get caught. If you're not already in the prison system, they don't have to arrest you then. They just send you to trial for it. But with literally a captive market. So that's the other thing, right? If you're addicted to something and you live in a neighborhood where you can come and go from your apartment, you can get a job, you can go to a rehab center and stay there and get clean and then go back to your apartment and go back to work. If you discover that living in that neighborhood makes it difficult for you to resist falling off the wagon of your addiction, you can move to another neighborhood, get another job somewhere else, change your friend group, and maybe try to find ways to support yourself in maintaining a healthy lifestyle as opposed to indulging in the addiction. And if you're in prison, you can't do any of those things. You can't move to another neighborhood. You can't change your friend group. Like, your friend group are the people that you run with for protection to keep yourself from getting the shit kicked out of you by the other inmates or killed. So you can't just create a support system for yourself or build with other people a support system for yourself to get clean. It's a lot more work if you're in an environment where you're captive and this kind of shit is going on. So with literally a captive market and huge markups for all goods sold inside, it's no surprise that so many guards got in on the action. And this is one where I think most people are naive about this. The guards didn't come there, discover the situation, and say, I want to be part of this. I'm 100% certain that some of those guards were part of the gangs on the outside that were operating on the inside and became guards in order to facilitate business.
Mm-hmm.
They're agents, essentially, of the gang.
Yep.
Nor is it a surprise that some of the guards became sexually involved with inmates. Some percentage of women will always be attracted to the wealthy, the powerful, and the famous. That's true in everyday life, and it was true in the BCDC, where a clear hierarchy of inmates ruled as virtual potentiates, and some of them, like Trayvon White, were affluent as well. As White bragged on the phone one day, I got elevated to this seat where, as though nobody in the jail could outrank me. Like, I am the law. So if I told any motherfucking buddy they had to do this, hit a police, do this, kill a motherfucker, anything, it got to be done. Period. The guy basically could order hits from prison. With power and money like this...
No, Hannah, they were coerced. They were manipulated by the men.
Yeah. With power and money like this, it's no surprise that female guards would be attracted to White. And of course, his inmate subordinates benefited from much the same type of privilege. Guards made good money in contraband that no one bought or sold without the permission of the BGF. Therefore, guards and the gang's chiefs had important financial relationships. That those led to sex was like one domino knocking down another.
Yeah.
The guards seem to have been very enthusiastic about sex with inmates. One of White's paramours, Jennifer Owens, was recorded saying this. Oh, jeez. This is going to piss you off, too. Me and my sisters, we was talking, right? So I said, you know what makes me stay with him? Sex! It's that I have 2 babies by him. Leave him for what? No one's going to give me sex like that.
Yeah.
I guess she's not attracted to accountants. One law review article described the attraction inmates had for guards this way. In reported narratives of women who became sexually involved with men in custody, they spoke of all the benefits of partnering that they were denied in relationships outside of custodial settings, and that they had access to inside. They described male inmates' physical and emotional availability. They also described feeling in control of the relationship. Boy, do they sound victimized.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you think about this, right? The emotional availability really quick. Right? That is a man who knows, first of all, what side his bread is buttered on. He's got to butter this woman up because she's in control over him. Second of all, he knows where the threat comes from. What can she do to him if he doesn't make her happy? if he doesn't keep her happy. And there's a woman feeling in control of the relationship. But yes, these cynical and devious inmates dominated these controlling and demanding women.
Yeah, I think a bigger discussion needs to be had around women's sexual desires and their they just don't really, that's their impetus for everything, right? And I think it's beyond the innate need or desire to procreate, right? This is not that. I think these women just want to be able to do whatever the hell they want to do. They want to be promiscuous. They want to be out here and their desire for this sex, right, it's a problem. It's a big problem because, number one, it creates unwanted children. Number two, you get yourself in risky situations and then they turn around and blame the men, right? And there's no accountability being given to them for it, right? And that is why we are where we are in society, right? Because it's not her fault. Oh, she was just doing her. She was just living her best life.
Yeah.
Okay, well, living her best life, her best decisions got her in the position that she's in now. And now what she wants is a bailout program from society.
When you think about this, that woman had 2 babies with a guy who was a career criminal, who was in prison, who was never going to be a normal, dad in the house, going to work, coming home, hanging out, reading stories with the kids and playing baseball in the backyard. He was going to go back and forth between the street and the prison system until he was in until death, till he did something that got him locked up for the rest of his life. That was his trajectory, and she wasn't doing anything to help him out of that situation. She was actually exacerbating it. She was making it worse, right? Just making it attractive to remain in that situation.
Right.
And here you have these 2 kids. That's their parents. How are they going to grow up? What lessons are they going to learn in their home? What's their school life going to be like? When this news story came out, I wonder if any of their classmates read about their mom and their dad. And I wonder if it gave them a lot of embarrassment or street cred or both.
Yeah.
What would you think if you were, 8 years old in elementary school or something? She doesn't say how old her babies are. I know a lot of moms talk about having babies when they're really referring to a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
No idea how old these kids are. They could be anywhere from infant and toddler age to near adults, and their mom would refer to them that way. So what if they're in school, right? What if they're school-age kids and they learn that their mom just got fired from her prison job? Now they're poor because they don't, who's going to hire this woman? I wouldn't, right? Who's going to hire this woman? And they're not going to get money from their dad. He's in prison. He just got busted. They're fucked.
Yeah.
And how's their life going to be? And
right.
Who's responsible for that? She is.
Well, she is. But will she be held responsible?
Nope. They probably did not even look at whether those kids needed to live with somebody else.
God, it's insane. It makes me so fucking mad.
Like I said, rage fuel, right? Here we are, and this is our prison system in the United States. right? So let's say that's going on, and you're a teenage boy who, maybe you get recruited by a gang, maybe you live in a smaller community outside that neighborhood, and you get busted shoplifting, or you get into a fight and you get an assault charge pressed on you, and you're just on the cusp of 18, so they decide to charge you as an adult and send you there. How do you rehabilitate yourself while you're in there? What chance do you have? How are you going to come out of there? When you come out of there, who are you going to be connected with?
Right.
That's why when I read about the prison system in the United States, I take it in small doses, one story at a time like this, because I get sick. I read about the way we treat some of the most vulnerable members of our population. Young men, teenage boys, men in their 20s, men who have been roped into joining gangs, men who have been down on their luck. Men get put in jail for being homeless, in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this is the system that's in place to help them? Really? Astonishingly, neither Tubin nor the article or the author of the Law Review article notices the obvious, the stark difference clearly described between love on the outside and love on the inside for those guards. Why would guards enjoy better relationships with inmates than with men in everyday life? Because they had greater control over the inmates. They said so themselves, and it's intuitively true. After all, there were 2,000 inmates to choose from, and if one didn't express the right kind of love and affection, another surely would. The guards had the inmates under their thumbs in ways that were impossible elsewhere. But, because those facts interfere with his narrative, Tubin misses the obvious.
They say rape isn't about sex, it's about power.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily true in a great deal of at least the cases that are wrongly called rape. But when it comes to prisoners and those who imprison them, I mean, that's the one case in which it's got to be true, in which is most likely to be true. Because you have to be a bit of a psychopath to enjoy sex more when it's coerced as opposed to when it's, mutually desired. I understand that there is such a mindset out there that makes that work, and they are generally psychopaths and sociopaths who happen to find themselves in situations where they can make that work and get away with it. It's what feminists would call, men in any given situation. But it's what anyone who isn't blinded by this madness would call prison sex. Prison rape. Let's not mince words. It's prison rape. We're going through all this. This all started with the headline of Jeffrey Tubin calling it abuse. Yeah, given the wide meaning of the term abuse at this point in history, that could mean like prisoners occasionally yell racial slurs at guards, because that's what abuse can be. It can mean saying things that people don't like. But in this case, we're saying abuse, as in prison rape, and we're completely flipping it on the prison rapists. This is all one big Darvo in the worst possible area in which you could even attempt to Darvo. But that's what it is.
Yeah.
And this has been the case since 9 years ago. The Darvo attacks were normal back then when it was just feminism versus men. And we've got to this whole other point where people are getting distracted by the tendrils of this fucking organism. And they're forgetting that it all started with feminists against men, and it's all happening because of feminists against men.
Yep, we are basically in a situation where a woman can take actions that would be understood as rape if a man did it to a woman and be considered the victim, even though the actual victim can't say no, has no power. He can't say no without consequences, serious consequences. Has no power, knows that he has no power, knows that he cannot escape those consequences, and he knows that they could be ongoing for as long as that woman is in his sphere of existence, and he has no way to change whether she's in his sphere of existence as long as he lives. And yet, she's the victim somehow, and he's a perpetrator. Like that you have to have such ideological blinders, such a twisted outlook toward women and personal agency in order to make that your outlook. The idea that, well, it's the men's fault. The men made this happen. The women are victims of it. The men are perpetrators of it. Even though it's not like they could have just backed off and avoided it. It's not like they could have run away from these women. It's not like they could have said no to these women without repercussions. It's not like there's a system in place to protect them from these women, right? They're actually under these women's control. But, it's still the men's fault. Like, you have to be a twisted person on the inside and maybe even on the outside to think that way. And if you think about, like, the women that talked about this in the story and the guy that talked about his money and everything, you think that guy would be sleeping with that woman outside the system if he was just anywhere he wanted to be? Like, if he didn't have to be in jail, if he was just living in a house or an apartment somewhere and doing what he wanted with who he wanted when he wanted, do you think she would have been his choice? I don't. I think a woman who wanted to dominate her partner like that would have been the last woman he was looking for. So, in short, female guards, according to objective facts and their own descriptions of their motivations, had a pretty good thing going. They rather lavishly supplemented their salaries, got good sex with men they liked, or in some cases loved, in relationships. I hesitate to call that love. They may have craved those men.
Love is love.
They may have been obsessed with those men, but if their criteria for the relationship is he can't get away, and I'm in charge, like, that's not love. Right? There's that old saying, if you love something, set it free. If it comes back to you, it's yours. If it doesn't, it never was.
I think that's kind of describes how Mike feels about owning pets.
I was not about to say that.
It's okay.
I know how many people I would piss off if I said that.
But I mean, if it can be true about pets, as sure as shit is true about people.
Yeah.
Right? But in some cases, loved. In relationships, they felt good about, and that they couldn't have on the outside. I'm gonna piss people off too. I think most women don't even understand love.
Mm-mm.
Women will say men don't understand love, right? But women will get mad if you forgot an anniversary of something other than the start of your relationship or your marriage. Oh, this is the anniversary of that special vacation we took that one time years and years ago. Okay. And women will get mad about that, right? Women will get mad if you don't notice they got their hair colored a slightly different shade this time of red than the last time they got their hair dyed red. Right? Women will get mad about that. They will hold it against you, and you'll be in an argument 10 years later, and she'll be like, well, you don't even look at me anyway. You didn't notice when I got my hair dyed auburn instead of copper. Like, what? What? What are you talking about? When did that happen? 10 years ago. Are you kidding me? You're bringing it up right now? Like, that's women, right? Women will do that to a man who would die to protect them.
Right.
A man who will beat his body up all day, every day, earning money to pay back the extended credit card bills that she's racking up, buying
While
curtains
she's
that are 3 feet too long for the windows.
And getting her hair dyed all these fucking different colors.
Right?
That he just doesn't appreciate.
He doesn't appreciate me. I'm going to cheat on him with 50 guys online and that'll show him. Like, that's women. So I always say women don't understand respect. Right? But I have to question whether most women truly understand love. Because they don't appreciate when a man comes home exhausted from physical labor or from a job that is just boring as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
You have to watch this dial for 8 hours. Don't look away from it. Or some shit like that, right? Men will do that because of incentive pay. You get more per hour to do that because it's hard to get people to do it. Men will come home covered literally in raw sewage because they've done that job, right? Because they love their families and they want to make sure their wife has enough money to run the household. Their children are well dressed. The food in the house is good. It's warm in there. It's safe in there. They have an alarm system if they need it. They have cars to get places. They can go to the doctor if they get sick. Men will get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get ready for an 8-hour day that they have to drive an hour to get to and an hour to get back from.
Right.
And women get mad because after doing all that, he doesn't notice that her hair was auburn instead of copper.
Right.
Like,
I
is
think
that love? How do you know what love is if to you love is counting up wrongdoings?
Right, exactly. Well, see, and again, this just goes back to how easy women have it, right? Like, love and adulation is ladled upon women from the time that they're born, and it never really stops. There's the attention seeking and the attention getting is just like it's an average everyday thing, right? Whereas guys, holy shit, if anybody looks their way, they might and smiles, it's a good day for them, And
people smile at you? Does that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. But so I think people who understand love understand that it comes with sacrifice, and sacrifice is kind of intertwined with it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of women just think love is adoration, right? It's not really based in anything other than I really like you. I really love you. You're so beautiful. You know what I mean?
Or wanting to be together all the time, or
Yeah.
having the hots for somebody. They don't think about being so invested in your loved one's personal welfare, their health, their well-being, their happiness, their safety, that you're willing to sacrifice yours for theirs.
Right.
And parents used to always do that for their children. You love your children. You sacrifice all kinds of things for your children's welfare. And it's why when I talk about planning for your children, I use the phrase love your children before you make them, before they're born, before you conceive. Because it's too late to only start loving them afterward.
Right.
Love them enough to prepare first. Because it's hell to try to scramble to make up for that preparation you didn't do after the baby's born. And it's terrifying, especially if you love your child after the child's born. You'll find yourself breaking the hell out of your body, just beating yourself up physically trying to get shit done so that you can make sure your child is going to be okay. And you'll never feel like you've done a good enough job. If you don't love
make
your kids
you make the
before they're
nest.
born.
You make the nest before you lay the eggs.
Yes.
Because otherwise the eggs are just going to fall through the tree branches and break, and you're going to feel like a dickhead.
It's a lot easier to build a nest when you're not holding the baby. Just leave it at that. You know, if you're sitting there holding the baby the whole time, what are you going to build a nest with? Not your hands. So yeah, women have this as a habit. They're just completely careless. We're completely careless with our fertility until it's in our face. Oh shit, now I can be responsible because now I have to. Right? Or the consequence falls on somebody that I care about. You know, like that's the situation. So when, you know, not to disparage the writer has made a great article here, but I think men in general give women too much credit in terms of love, and it's one of the reasons why. And I've been delayed in my video making for the last month by problems with my old laptop computer. I got a new one, so I'm working on restoring my capacity to actually produce the videos and publish them. But my video about marriage is not going to make women happy at all. There's not a good reason for women. There's not a good reason for men to trust women, and there's not a good reason for women to be able to say, I deserve your loyalty. Right? There's no natural thing that women have been doing that legitimizes that demand. There's no debt built there for one thing, right? You can't say you owe me your loyalty, you owe me your love, because you haven't done anything for him. Right? And you can't say I am good enough to earn it, to deserve it, to inspire it. Because for fuck's sake, what have you done, women, that is that inspiring?
Right. And in the case that you have done something like that, then certainly you would have found that person for you, and you wouldn't be having these complaints.
Right. But, you know, we do see men give women that loyalty and their love and their honor and sacrifice for women who have done nothing to deserve it, and then get treated like they don't love them because, you know, of petty complaints and stupid shit.
Men are afraid to offend women. That's it. And men are afraid to stand up for themselves. They're afraid to say anything to women that would go against, you know, what she wants, you know, or challenge her in any way.
They're too kind.
Yes. I mean,
it's not even always just fear. They're too kind. They care.
Exactly. Men give way too much deference to women, and I understand why, but I think we as a society need to break men of that habit, because most of these women out here, shit, I'm not going to put numbers on it, but hey, let's say if you toss a coin and you got a 50-50 chance of running into a crazy bitch, you know, do you really want to give her the benefit of the doubt? I mean, obviously
well, you have the situation where, you know, the woman is raised to be entitled, but she's also got a natural sense of entitlement. She also doesn't understand love. Right? Mm-hmm. So she gets the hots for a guy, but she won't support him. She won't be there for him. She doesn't make herself... Like, these women demand emotional availability. Are they providing emotional availability?
I mean, shit. Emotional availability, that's one thing. Are they providing anything else? I mean, these women talk. These women talk about, what I bring to the table. I'm such a prize. I'm any guy should be happy to have me. Well, why? What really do you bring to the table besides your fucking emotional baggage and your neediness, and your fucking codependency?
Yeah.
I don't get it. Yes, brain is broken. My brain broken.
Yeah, it's galling. That's why I said this article is rage fuel. And even though, it's well written, it's written by a voice for men guy, and it sees through the issues and everything. Even, like I said, there are some things, even men are too nice to these women. You think about that situation, it just keeps sticking in my head there, that one bit. And it's probably the reason why I insisted on doing this article, even though, like I said, it's a 9-year-old article. Is we had this guard who described her reasons for getting into a relationship, for essentially raping this prisoner. I know he may say, yeah, well, I consented. Like, well, would you have consented if you had more choice in the matter? But this prison guard, this prison guard rapist said that her reasons for wanting to be in the relationship were sex, and she made 2 babies with this guy who never is going to get a chance to be a real father. Right? He's never going to be able to sit and read stories to his kids before they go to bed. He's never going to be able to teach them to throw a baseball. He's not going to be able to teach them how to drive. He's not going to give them advice on how to live their lives from inside the prison system, right? He's not going to get hugs from his kids. He's not going to get calls on Father's Day. He's not going to get Father's Day cards or a tie. He's going to get nothing. And his kids are going to get nothing from their father because he can't give them anything. He can't be anything to them. What can he do? Right? And on top of all of that, her reason is because she's in control of the relationship. There is nothing about that that is anything like love.
No. And, don't forget, Hannah, she wanted the good sex.
Mm-hmm.
She got the good sex.
Get a fucking vibrator.
Do something. Use a. I don't know. Do whatever the fuck you got to do. And it didn't really specify. Not that it really makes a difference, but whether or not this woman had 2 kids with this man while he was incarcerated or beforehand. But again, is anybody vetting these people?
Yeah, we've already seen a no on that.
They know. They just have to have a high school diploma, pass a piss test, not have been arrested within the past whatever amount of time, and
right.
All right, fine, here you go, good to go, keys to the cell.
Oh, geez. Hang on a second, guys. I hope the show doesn't suddenly end. But Windows just decided to force an update. I'm
Boy.
scheduling a restart right now. This is fucking stupid.
Man.
I'm gonna schedule it on Saturday, and then I'll just restart after I'm done with the after show. Like, it didn't even tell me it was doing this. I have those turned off, so this must be one of those emergency things. Good God. Like, this repeatedly happens during Showtime. If they're gonna do an emergency forced update, it always seems to happen during Showtime.
Yeah.
I never noticed that Thursday evening is the time for updates. Like, that just... And I actually have taken active measures to avoid this. I update on Wednesday in between the shows, the Tuesday show and the Thursday show. And then there's a feature that allows you to tell it to not do updates for a period of time. And I set it to the longest amount of time that you're allowed to set it for. And then, the next Wednesday, I go through and manually update again. with the idea being that I'm updating every Wednesday. It should be, good to go on both Tuesday and Thursday. But nope. Fucking Windows. And I'm not updating to Windows 11. They can go fuck themselves.
We do still appear to be live.
Yeah.
Just in case we go off any second now. Please go to feedthebadger.com and good night.
Yeah.
Men's rights advocates are literal machines.
I think I got it. It doesn't look like it's booting me, but yeah. I've even disabled the Windows updates in services before. It doesn't hold. When Microsoft decides to do a forced update, it overrides all those settings. So, I don't know. Something's going on. Anyway, so to go on with the article, and I'm going to read like a couple more paragraphs, and then I'm going to look at, let's see here, just really quick, so I know where we are. Yeah, there's a lot more to this, so I'm gonna continue this next week, but we'll go back to the blue paragraph here that I've selected if it's still there. All right. That's the one that we just read. So, to many, including the guards, that looks like a win-win situation. Adult women sized up a situation and made rational choices about how to behave to bring about the greatest benefits to themselves in the context of the jail. And we can't have that. The idea of women acting autonomously in their own perceived self-interest is not favored by much of our news media and popular culture. So it fell to Jeffrey Toobin to convince New Yorker readers that far from the female guards making their own autonomous choices, cynical and devious men succeeded in dominating women, who were normally their keepers. So that's where we'll stop this week. It just blows my mind. Like, they're completely in charge. They're completely in control. They completely dominate these men in every way. And yet, they're victims. They're victims, those poor women. So, with that, let's make sure I don't have any super chats that I've missed. I think I read Richard's as they were applicable to the moment. And that last one about justifying paying women less, well, you might as well not pay them at all. They're making plenty of money on the side, aren't they?
Right? Seriously. Excuse me, on the side, tax exempt motherfucker. Look. Send those goddamn 87,000 IRS agents, send them after them bitches, okay? Because they making a pretty goddamn penny.
Yep, pretty much.
Ooh, shit.
Pretty
Sorry,
much.
I don't know where that came from.
You got it though. I mean, like, here we are. We're squeaking by, making an honest living,
right?
And the IRS agents in question, were that whole thing was done to go after people like us, right? That was not to go after people like them. It was not to go after Nancy Pelosi and her projects that never get finished. Right, or never materialize. It was to go after, Joe Schmo, like the convenience store worker or the construction worker or the line worker who is barely eking out a living past his wife's credit card expenditures, and maybe gets a Christmas gift from his still living grandmother. And she sends PayPal through PayPal. She sends him $600. Boom, IRS. Right. That's it. $15,000 a month in contraband in the prison system. We don't know.
Right.
Don't care. Like, the only reason the government probably got mad about that is because they're not getting tax dollars off of it. So, but let's see. We are done with the super chats. So we have one from yesterday. At 9:53 p.m. That was a $5 super chow from Mrs. Anna Vark, who said hugs for the Badgers. Today at 7:03 p.m., Meredith G gave us $5 and said, honey for the Badgers, super chows are the best. Thanks for the thought-provoking discussion. Then we have Michael Emmerich Windberg gave us $5 and said, "Let us take a moment to admire that this is not even a double standard. The complaint about she was asking for it is employed by activists to strawman the fictional argument for defending the rape of a woman because of what she chose to wear. Meanwhile, they deliberately and directly use it against boys when they were grabbed, handcuffed, thrown into a cage where they raped them." Yeah. And their whereabouts means, they were asking for it. Zapier gave us $5 and said, "Marriage never made sense to me. What logical reason would a man have for choosing marriage? What can he gain from it? Maybe some tax benefits if he's the breadwinner and a pretentious flex that allows him to call her his wife. Like, you don't need marriage. Just move in together, write a will and testament, get it notarized, and that's it. You can even get a living will and an advanced directive. I wouldn't risk marriage unless she makes more than me, and I know she always will. I can see if a party was seen at fault for ruining a marriage, but this no-fault divorce crap just takes away any accountability. Crazy that some bird species can stay monogamous till death, but humans need government or religion to step in." And I will point out this.
We don't. Is the thing.
Yeah, government or religion stepping in is a modern invention, and it actually has created a situation.
Marriage has been a ceremonial thing for thousands and thousands of years before such a thing as a government ever existed. And as a ceremony, there's obvious reasons it exists. It's almost anthropic in its logic. The fact that it's existed for so long makes sense. But it's only ceremonial, and it only means anything, morally, dare I say, ethically, among the families that participate in it. It is basically a party, but it's an important party in which families come together and say, "Yo, these two people love each other. Isn't that great?"
And therefore we accept the rest of you as part of our extended family now.
It is important that families, find a way to accept each other, because it necessarily happens every time, two people create another chain in the having of the children and whatnot. There was never any reason for the government to get involved, and this is a sticking point for people. When you say marriage, do you mean what the government defines as marriage, or do you mean what millennia of tradition defines as marriage? And this is the problem with so many things. The government gets its claws into things, and then we start defining that thing as the government's claw in that thing. Yeah, I'm always have been against any idea of the government getting involved in someone's love life, and I mean love life not in a frivolous sense, because everyone needs a love life, especially when it comes to a long-term partner. And yeah, I've always been against that. And that has even got in the way of my understanding of marriage as an institution. Because like I say, you forget that institutions can exist outside the government. Imagine an institution of marriage that existed outside the government.
I think it would be 10 times, 100 times better.
It would be religious, and this is ways, and I will give that to religion. If they can take it away from the government, I'll be like, fine, I will join a religion to get married. Way before I join a fucking government to get married.
I don't even need either one.
I trust religion more than I trust government at this point, and I never thought I'd say that.
You don't really need either one. Pair bonding happens outside of authority. It's a form of dedication, and I would actually argue to the people who think government needs to be involved in marriage. I would actually argue that authority gets in the way of two people striving to maintain the health of their relationship, to foster their dedication to each other, to foster their intimacy with each other. Government gives you a piece of paper that says all that exists, that you can just point to and say, well, see, we're married, we're a couple, we don't have to consistently strive to be close to each other, this piece of paper says other people can't interfere in our relationship, and we're not supposed to abandon it. And our, like, the whole no-fault divorce thing is really not, it's not real. Like, we talk about it as no-fault divorce, but there is no such thing as no-fault divorce. We went from his or her fault to divorce to his fault only divorce. That is what we did. And it is evident in the fact that women are awarded custody over 80% of the time when there's a custody battle. And it's evident in the fact that when women have custody versus when men have custody, the man is expected to support two households more often and to a greater degree than the woman is. And when there is alimony to be paid, it usually is awarded to the woman from the man. That is not no fault. That is his fault. That is divorce that is not saying that it's actually his fault, but that is divorce that is deemed his fault. Even if she abandons him, even if she cheats on him, even if she abuses him in any other way, right? Even if she beats him, even if she rapes him, even if she poisons him, it's still his fault divorce. So, I don't buy in the whole no-fault divorce thing.
No, it's guilty until proven not financially responsible.
Right.
At your own cost.
Guilty until proven female. And that says a lot about women and their inability to be accountable for themselves. Like, men are expected, if they live on their own, if they're raising children on their own, they are expected to figure out a way to make it work financially, to figure out what they have to do, what they have to sacrifice, how much they have to break their bodies, how many jobs they have to do, who they have to embarrass themselves in front of by begging, whatever they have to do to make sure that those kids are fed and clothed and have a roof over their heads at the father's expense and not at the expense of daddy government. Right? Women don't have that stipulation. Women don't have that level of responsibility and accountability. And because of it, women don't rise to greatness as frequently or as high as men do. And there is no such thing as no-fault divorce. There is his fault divorce and bigger his fault divorce.
Yeah.
So, Xeranx gave us $5 super chat and said, have to separate government from kids. Its tendrils start inside the birth canal. Disgusting enough. Once that happens, people can opt for governmentless unions. And actually, yeah, you do have to disentangle government from kids. And it's sad, but the government's tendrils start, I would say, before conception. Because women are getting advice from their school system, which is run by the government, regarding their birth control choices, their sexual choices, whether they're responsible for those choices or not, and so on. And in sex education, they're told everything is not their fault. Everything is not their responsibility. It might suck to be in this situation. It's his fault, but you have to prevent it. And if you don't, you have to go to the government for money. They're not told, you have to watch your children grow up in poverty, you have to deal with this, you have to deal with that, and it's your fault, because you're the one with the uterus. Right? So, they should be, or they shouldn't be told anything by the school. Zapier also gave us $5 and suggested, switch to Linux. I recommend Linux Mint, Pop OS or Zorin OS operating systems, best for absolute noobs. Besides, Microsoft is an evil spyware company anyway, and it is. That is true. The only thing I do with this computer though is this show. I have a computer just for this live stream and being on the news show. That's the only thing I use it for. So I don't know. I might put some effort into that. But it's gonna have to wait. So I was telling everybody last week how the overtime situation was starting to settle down. the person that was fixing that problem just quit. So I'm kind of fucked. But at the same time, you know, I'll get overtime cash from it. So who knows? Maybe it'll be enough for me to get the information I need, and then take the time to peruse it, and you know, do a different setup so things will get better. But in the meantime, you'll just have to put up with me being not nearly as computer literate with modern computers as I was back in the 80s with you know, older computers, the computers of the day. And with that, I don't think. Let me look at Rumble here, but I don't think there's. Yeah, there's nothing paid on Rumble, but jeez. Yeah, you gotta go to Rumble and look at our show and read the comments. Calling marriage a tax benefit for getting married is like claiming that not getting arrested is a benefit of having your driver's license with you. Getting arrested is a penalty. And that's kind of true because, honestly, there's not really a valid excuse for higher taxes for single men. Like, the people who draw on the system the most are married couples and their children. And, you know, that's yeah. That makes no sense whatsoever. But that's all I'm going to read from there. I think that's probably the most pertinent comment. We do have quite a few more comments than we had before. So we got a couple of guys commenting now. So we just need to get more of you on listening to us on Rumble. We just have the same name on Rumble. I think you can find a link to our... It's HB Radio. Sorry, it's not the same name. So just look for HB Radio on Rumble. And it looks like right now we have 544 followers on Rumble. So look for our Rumble account and follow us there too. We definitely, it's a lot smaller than, say, our YouTube channel, Twitch and everything. I don't even know if Twitch still exists after what just happened. But there's that. And with that, thanks everyone for listening. Thanks both you guys for sticking out this ugly sausage. Like, this is a rotten sausage. I guess we had a lot of good things to say though. And thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. And good night all.
Good night, y'all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.